Hi guys, Coach Fenz here from FTP Training. Welcome to another Friday Tips with Fenz. Okay, something that I talk a lot to my athletes about and can cause major issues for both myself and to the athletes is how one power meter may not measure the same as another power meter. What do I mean by that? Is the accuracy of power meters is often given as plus or minus 1.5 or 2%. Which means when we're trying to look for subtle changes and increases in performance across our power curve, these can be lost due to the inaccuracy of each power meter. When we're looking at this over time, of course, this can lead to major problems because, when you're working with a coach or you're working on your own to try and improve performance, you've changed power meter and suddenly you're 10 or 15 watts lower on threshold, or your 1 minute power is 50 watts lower. This can be really quite a psychological blow. We're training really hard and everything seems to be going great and you seem to be feeling great out on the bike, and yet when you get home, you download the data, it's not giving you improvements. In fact, it's looking like you're going backwards. And although this may seem trivial in some sense, is that your performance on the road you may see is going great, you feel great, it is a huge psychological blow to see that happening. So if we look at power meters as being in general plus or minus 2% of accuracy, of course, if one is at the top end of that range and one is at the bottom end of that range, then obviously there can be quite a big difference in overall power output. And as you get fitter and fitter, those improvements in performance become less and less. And we're looking for 5 or 10 watts. And that can be a major or significant improvement in performance, suggesting that the training intervention that we've done has really done what we've wanted it to. But again, if your power meter is different to the power meter you used before, you've changed from, a SRAM Quark to a Pioneer or to a Stages, there are lots of different power meters out there. What you have to remember is you're not looking at apples for apples. Okay, you can't statically calibrate all of your power meters to be exactly the same. Most of us don't have the capabilities to do that. Again, back in the day, I was using SRMs when we first started, and then Quarks. I was able to have a static weight of 15 kilos, which was measured at the post office at 14.68 kilos. And I was able to do static calibrations on all of my power meters, and I did it each month to check drift in slope and make sure that power meters were measuring the same. A lot of the time now it's a little bit more difficult to do, and it's also time consuming to do, and people often don't do that. So what I suggest doing in that sense is that if you've changed power meter, I would make sure that you retest and you use that test. And I would do a power profile test. I'd be looking at my short-term power outputs, 3, 5, 10, 20 second sort of power outputs, do all them in a short test looking at your peak powers. And then I'd look at your 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute power outputs, and then look at your, sort of 20 minute power. If you've looked along your whole power curve with a significant set of tests, and you see that, you were in peak form on your other power meter, but this one's reading low, then you can't compare. If it's significantly higher, you can't compare. So what I would suggest you do then is you set that as your baseline to measure your performance going forward. And, with something like a Today's Plan platform, that's actually quite easy to do. We can select the period that we're going to look at, and we don't necessarily have to look at that back to our overall peak performances from years ago, or from last year, or from 6 months ago if we've recently changed. And we can look at that in our power tab, and we can look at it on our actual power curve and assess, what power meter was it that we achieved our personal bests, and maybe that was reading high or maybe that was reading low. So I think if you make sure that you test with the new power meter and use that as your new benchmark and measure your performance going forward based upon those results, then you will be able to quantify valid improvements in performance. You have to make sure you do your zero offsets and calibrate your power meters. Do them on every ride. Remember that if there's a significant shift in temperature while out on that ride, you really need to, if you're just about to do a test, you really need to stop, calibrate your power meter if that shift has been 5, 10, 15 degrees. And that can happen now as we're going into winter. You go out early in the morning and it can often shift quite rapidly into warmer temperatures, causing a drift in slope and causing a problem with the accuracy of our power meters. Making sure you get that right means that you can pick up on those subtle changes, improvements, or, you know, if your performance has dropped off, and that enables us to understand the significance and the intervention we've done and how valid it was, and whether that's something we can implement again or whether it's something we need to revise. Again, this happens and has been a bone of contention. It doesn't matter whether you're the weekend warrior using a power meter or whether you're, you know, a professional athlete. It can cause major issues. So you need to really make sure that you're looking at apples for apples with power meters. You know, they are a guide for us for training intensity. They're not the be-all and end-all of what we do, but they help us significantly understand and quantify our performance. Make sure the new power meter is tested, and it'll help you get over any of those problems, quantifying improvements over time. All right, guys, I hope that's helped. And if you just bought a new power meter, I suggest you go out and have a little test. Make sure it's, you set your new benchmarks. All right, guys, thanks very much. I'll catch you out on the road or trail. Bye-bye.